not all those who wander are lost. Sometimes it takes time to find your meaning in your life, and just because you don't have a goal right then and there, doesn't mean that you should have one. And Marc Ferrari was one of the, when I got here, he was one of the first guys in my office saying, I want to know more about the Entrepreneurship Center, I want to know how I can help. And then he told me about his career, and I said, dude, you've got to tell people about this. This is really fascinating. It's not just about his career as an entrepreneur, which he was very successfully, but he's always followed his passion, always. So one disclaimer, Cal Lutheran students, what Marc is about to tell you is his life. Stay in school. I literally get paid to tell you that. If anybody leaves, I may be leaving right behind you for the wrong reason. But Marc has a really fascinating story. I'm really thrilled that he's here to tell you about it. So Marc Ferrari. Okay, so one other tradition we do here is we all take a selfie with the speaker. So Marc and I are going to be up here taking the selfie. I'm going to be the most embarrassing out of all of you, but what I need you to do is when I say go, hands up in the air. I know you can't record noise on a camera, but make some noise and make it look cool. This is going live. So 1, 2, 3, go! Okay, one more just to make sure. 1, 2, 3, go! Awesome. Thank you. You guys are invited back. You've been the best.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate it, and welcome again. Is this too loud? It sounds a little boomy. Go too loud? Okay. I'm used to being loud on the guitar. But, I wanted to thank Mike Panessis again and Evan Forster for having me here. This is such an amazing place here. I actually read about this in 805 magazine. And by the way, I'm also a resident in the area. I live in Old Agora. I've been raising my family here, living here 15 years. So to find this place, literally in my backyard, was such an amazing thing for me. To know that we have this space here available for young entrepreneurs and for the entire entrepreneurial community. Not only the students coming up to the program, but for everybody. We all benefit from it. And so again, just wanted to say thank you very much for having me here tonight. You're probably wondering why a long-haired guy like this is up here talking to you without a college degree. And I know we have the disclaimer here about staying in school, but I had a kind of a different path in life than a lot of people, and that is me about 25 years ago. Yes. By the way, the book is here. This is the office copy, I guess, but you can find this on Amazon for about $2. Rockstar 101, and that is my hair. And that was one phase of my life. And just to get something out of the way, I'm not related to the Ferrari family, but I do actually own a Ferrari. And for you car enthusiasts out there, that is a 430 Scuderia, which is the track car variant of that model. And the story of how I came to own such a beautiful car is one of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight. Cars are one of my passions, and the opening slide you saw was the power of passion. One thing that has driven me in my career, both musically and business, has been passion. So we have a couple of encyclopedic definitions of passion: any power or compelling emotion or feeling, a strong amorous feeling or desire, strong sexual desire or lust. You guys wouldn't know anything about that. But number 6 was the one that kind of applied to me: a strong or extravagant fondness, enthusiasm, or desire for anything, such as a passion for music. As I mentioned, I have many passions in my life, but music has been my lifelong passion. That's me, 9 years old with my very first guitar. I discovered the guitar, I should say, maybe the guitar discovered me when I was about 9 years old, and I was always a very hyperactive kid. And if I would be, back then, if they would have analyzed me, I probably would have had ADHD or ADD or something with 3 initials in it. But the guitar really calmed me, and I was really drawn to it. I remember very distinctly the first time I discovered the guitar. I was over at a cousin's house, and I was running around being obnoxious, and there was a guitar in the corner. My mom gave it to me and said, "Here, do something with this." So that was my discovery of the guitar. Very quickly, it became my love, my muse. Of course, back in those days, we didn't have a lot of other things to distract us, like the internet or video games or anything. So I spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours on my guitar. KISS. Why is this important? Well, like most kids of my generation, and I'm born in 1962, I'm not gonna sugarcoat that I'm 52 years old. I feel pretty good for being a half a century old. But most kids of my age were extremely influenced by KISS. KISS was the biggest band back in the 70s. And I got to see KISS when I was 14 years old. I went to go see them in Niagara Falls. And from that moment on, I knew exactly what I wanted to do in my life. I wanted to be on stage. I wanted to be in front of that audience. I wanted to be playing loud guitar. I wanted to hear the screaming crowds. I wanted to be there on stage. Of course, at 14 years old, I didn't know exactly how I was going to get to that point, but I had a focus. And again, my focus was driven by passion, my passion for music. So KISS was a very, very kind of an important touchstone for me. Again, it was the first concert I ever saw. I think you remember your first concert. Most of you guys probably remember the first concert that you went to, and mine was KISS. We're going to find out a little bit later that a member of KISS became involved with me in my professional career later. So all throughout high school, I continued my passion for music. Like most other guys my age, you know, we played in bands. Started out pretty innocently playing backyard parties, you know, with generators, and that was one on the left there is me playing the high school concert when I was about 17 years old, and already had dreams of stardom in my mind. And even though I was playing in bars when I was 16 years old, back then the drinking age in New York where I grew up was 18, but I was playing bars every weekend when I was starting at 16 years old, keeping some pretty late hours and, you know, living it up a little bit. I actually managed to graduate as my class salutatorian. And this is true, that I did not know that I was going to be my class salutatorian until the last week of school when they told me. Had I known that a little earlier, I might have actually, applied myself a little more to become the valedictorian. But I had a 96.5 grade point average, and I actually earned a 4-year scholarship called a Regent Scholarship. New York State had that back in the day, where I could have taken that scholarship. I could have gone to any state school in New York State, 4 years, free ride. What did I do? I moved to Boston to join a rock band and wash dishes. So needless to say, my parents were kind of scratching their heads at that decision. I realized the value of education. As a matter of fact, both of my parents were educators. My father worked for the New York State school system, and my mother was a school teacher. And I was actually a teacher too. I started teaching guitar lessons when I was 13 years old. And that's how I earned my living for my teenage years, playing in the bands and teaching guitar. So I knew the value of education, but I also knew that I had to follow my dream. I had to. I would have been miserable if I hadn't at least, attempted to follow my dream. And to my parents' credit, they allowed me to do that. It was my life. They steered the ship in the right direction, but I'm the captain of my own ship. So off to Boston I went. I spent 3 years in Boston playing in, bands that went nowhere, doing some recordings, and learning to live on my own. And I'm proud of the fact that even though I was living pretty frugally in those days, I never borrowed money from my parents. I remember having some conversations with them where after a couple of years it was like, well son, you still got that scholarship, don't you think it's time to put that to use? Or, I remember my father asking me once, don't you think you should have something to fall back on? And I said, Dad, I do have something to fall back on. It's called my ass. So I was pretty stubborn, but I knew that I had to follow my dream. I had to pursue my passion. Fast forward after my 3 years in Boston, when we were starving, we were cold, and 1983 was a pivotal year for hard rock music, commercial hard rock music. I don't know if you guys remember the US Festival or hearing about the US Festival in 1983. Now, granted, some of you guys weren't even born in 1983. But in 1983, the US Festival was put on by Apple. I think Wozniak put it on. And one of those days was Heavy Metal Day. And Van Halen was the headliner that day. And a lot of other bands from the hard rock era were on the bill that day, including Quiet Riot, which was in Los Angeles. So 1983 was the year that hard rock, or hair metal as it's affectionately called, really began to gain traction, and bands started to sell a lot of records. And 1983 was my third year in Boston. Again, we'd gone through some pretty lean times, and we started hearing all this great music coming out of Los Angeles. All these bands had independent records coming out, and three of my buddies, my cover band, came out here on a little vacation to check things out. They met some girls, they fell in love with the girls, and so we decided to move the band to Los Angeles. So we figured, you know what, if we're going to be starving, we might as well be starving where it's warm. We might as well be starving where the girls are. We might as well be starving where all this great music was coming from. And of course 1984 was the Olympics here too. There was just a lot of buzz about Los Angeles. So I moved to Los Angeles in January 1984 from back east. 2 months after I got out here, my three friends decided to move back home. They ran out of money, they broke up with their girlfriends, they missed their mommies, all that kind of stuff. I was a little disheartened to hear that, because these were my friends, and our game plan was to, move out here and put the band back together, but my other three friends weren't as motivated as I was. And I was not from the Boston area originally. I wasn't going to go back. I just, in my gut knew that Los Angeles was the place to be. And through a friend of a friend, a mutual friend who knew somebody, I got introduced to the guy in the middle, this guy named Ron Keel. Ron Keel had been living in Los Angeles for a number of years, had a band called Steeler. Are you guys familiar with the Evan's shaking his head, he knows that band. Steeler was a band that didn't get a major label deal, but had a lot of great players in it. They had a very successful independent record out, and Ron was, he was a star in his own right. But for whatever reason, Steeler never got signed. Although all these other bands that even opened up for Steeler got signed. Bands like Rat and Great White and Dokken, and I don't know if any of these names mean anything to you guys, but these were all multi-platinum bands that ruled the airways in the 80s. Anyways, I had an unfortunate thing happen to me, which led to a fortunate thing happen to me. I had a jacket stolen from me. I had a jacket that my parents had given me, which I had all throughout my years in Boston. I go to a club called the Rainbow, I leave the jacket on the seat, go to the bathroom, the jacket's gone. And I'm like crushed, and great, my friends are leaving me, great. It was, the first couple of weeks here were not, not the best for me. So I'm shopping for a new jacket down in Melrose, and I run into a mutual friend of Ron Keel's. And he's the one that told me that Ron is breaking up this band, Steeler, and is forming a new band he's going to call Keel. Let me put you in touch with him. And that was my introduction to Ron. This is a poster from our very first show at Perkins Palace in April of 1984. And I don't know if you noticed on the bottom right, the first band on the bill that night was a band called Stryper. Stryper is a Christian rock band that went on to sell millions and millions and millions of records, became very, very popular. But they actually were fourth on the bill that night. So Keel worked hard, extremely hard. Us as a band, we rehearsed every day. It was like musical boot camp with our band. We rehearsed in this tiny little room down in South Central. Not a very great place, but we worked extremely hard. And lo and behold, 3 months after I joined the band, we got signed to A&M Records. And the guy in the middle there is the bass player for Kiss. That's Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons is, of course, now he's blowing up pretty big too these days, right? And everything he does. But Gene, who I had been in the audience seeing him in Kiss just a scant few years before, is now in the studio producing our major label debut. So it's kind of interesting how those things happen. That is the album cover for The Right to Rock, which was our major label debut on A&M Records. Did you work there?
I would be, yeah.
Yeah,
A little after that.
a little after that, but he was cleaning up our mess.
That's right.
This album at the time was the fastest selling debut album on A&M Records. We shot out of the starting gate pretty fast. We won Best New Band in 1985 in 3 out of the 4 major rock magazines that were out there. And I kid you not, we beat out Bon Jovi in several of these magazines. We beat out Iron Maiden in 1 or 2 of them. Huge, huge bands that, of course, wound up selling a lot more records than us. But at the time, we really were, we were out of the starting gate pretty fast. The title track, The Right to Rock, was a great anthem. And it came out at a time when the PMRC was making all that stink about explicit lyrics and wanting to, shut down major label record companies and everything. And so for the course of the next 4 years, I was on an amazing rocket ride with this band. I'm hanging out with Barbra Streisand here, hanging out with Sam Kinison here, covers of magazines. There's the next 3 albums that we released. This one was called The Final Frontier. The middle one was simply titled Keel, and this one was called Our Living Live. On the Keel album, we got to 1987. We got to, I mentioned Bon Jovi. We actually went out with Bon Jovi for a whole summer, which was a really amazing thing to be a part of. Playing these huge, huge venues, multiple nights. 3 nights at Madison Square Garden, 3 nights at the Jersey Meadowlands, 3 nights at Nassau Coliseum. Yeah, it was for a kid that just dreamed about this kind of thing. I felt on top of the world. I think that about sums it up there. Okay. There's time for work, there's time for play, right? I guess we were lucky that our work was our play back in those days, We were there for a very amazing part of history in the commercial hard rock era. We had our day in the sun. What am I doing on the toilet seat? I'm not quite sure, but that was part and parcel of the kind of things that we were doing back then. So Keel had a pretty good run at it, 4 albums, 4 years. In 1988, I actually left Keel. Now, why would I do that? Well, I was starting to feel my oats a little bit. Number one, I had some disagreements with Ron as far as the direction of the band. He wanted to take it in a more commercial, poppy direction with keyboards, and I just was not into that. I formed another band right out of Keel called Cold Sweat, which actually got signed to MCA Records too. This is my second turn at bat. Originally the band was called Ferrari, but we changed the name to Cold Sweat. This album came out in 1990, and again, the same kind of cycle. We toured all over the world. We got to play Europe. We got to play with some pretty amazing bands here. And unfortunately, this record kind of fell on flat ears. And it came out in a time that musical tastes were shifting, okay? In the early 90s, you started getting these bands from Seattle that were much darker and much more basic and did not rely on the visual aspects as much as some of my contemporaries did. And so there was definitely a changing of the guard in the early 90s, and by, let's say, 92 or 93, anybody that came from a commercial hard rock band was considered a pariah. Now there were a few bands that kind of rode out the storm. Bon Jovi still going on, Aerosmith, maybe Def Leppard, a few bands that kind of weathered that storm. But come the early 90s, guys like me were a tough sell, and it was very clear that that our day in the sun was over. Oh, Wayne's World. You guys ever see Wayne's World? Look who's hiding in the back there. That's me. So I was actually a guitar player in both Wayne's World movies. I was in Tia Carrera's band. There's Tia right there in the front. I got that because I had a relationship with the director, not a sexual relationship, but a friendly relationship with the director of Wayne's World. Her name was Penelope Spheris. And Penelope was, she was first a documentary filmmaker. She did a movie called The Decline of Western Civilization, which documented the music scene here. And then I read somewhere that she was going to be directing Wayne's World. And so I called her up and I said, hey, I hear you're directing Wayne's World, and if there's anything I can do to help, I'm here, I'm your guy. And she goes, well, I need a guitar player for this film. What are you doing for the summer? And I said, I'm doing the film. Amazing experience to be part of that film. And Wayne's World 2, we had much more. In Wayne's World 1, the band was more featured. I think 4 or 5 live scenes. But it's amazing hanging out with Dana Carvey, Mike Myers, Brian Doyle Murray. Wayne's World 2, Chris Farley was on the set. There's Wayne's World 2. Steven Tyler, Aerosmith, of course, was the featured band in Wayne's World 2. That was, by the way, that was filmed right out here at, what's the name of that place on Mulholland? Yeah, Calamigos Ranch, exactly right. Yeah, it was filmed right out here. Wayne Stock was the name of the film there. So I got to do a little bit of, I don't even call it acting, I'm not an actor, but I got to be part of some of these projects and did a couple of TV shows as a guitar player, largely through my work here with Wayne's World. But it was an amazing experience, as I said earlier, to be part of this whole thing. So, Elisha's a performing artist, recording artist. And I thought perhaps I would leave you guys with a couple of pearls of wisdom from the various chapters of my life. My goal here tonight, by the way, I'm not claiming to have the answers to everything. All I'm hoping to do here tonight is impart something that might connect with you. Okay, my path in life is certainly different than a lot of other people's. But we all have stories. And we all have something that we can learn from each other. And my goal tonight is to perhaps impart just a little bit of knowledge to you, or maybe something that I say that resonates with you, that you can take out of here and move forward as you pursue your passions in your life. But anyways, talk about the sweet spot. They say the sweet spot is finding something that you love to do and you're good at. And the tennis players will tell you that sweet spot on the racket is that one spot, man, where you hit it, it fucking goes. Pardon my French. Or the base, you swing the baseball player, that one part on the bat where you hit it just right, and it's a home run. So if you can find that intersection of what you love to do and what you're good at, you're halfway there. I was good at certain things, but I wasn't passionate about it. I was good at math, but I didn't see myself being a math teacher. I was good at taking apart electronics, but I didn't see myself being a radio repair guy. So there were things I was good at that I wasn't passionate about. And there were conversely things I was passionate about that I wasn't good at. I was passionate about baseball. I love baseball, but I was a mediocre baseball player. So that wasn't the intersection. The intersection for me was music. I got good at music and I loved it. So we come to the aha moment, where I think most entrepreneurs will tell you they have an aha moment. And for me, as I mentioned earlier, in the early 90s, when my playing days, my second band, Cold Sweat, came and went pretty unceremoniously, I was at a crossroads, and I knew that I had to do something different. I had to make a pivot. But what was that pivot? And I didn't have very many skills. As I mentioned, I wasn't good at I didn't have any carpentry skills. I didn't know how to fix cars. Computers were just coming around back in the early 90s. I didn't know how to fix computers. I was good at music. So what could this next sweet spot be? Well, I had another kind of interesting, fortuitous thing happen that was my aha moment. Back in the early 90s, I was recording a lot of demos. That's what musicians do. They record, right? They put their songs down. They have something to play somebody. A friend of mine was working on a small film, a B movie. I think he was an assistant coffee maker or something like that. But the director had asked him to find him some rock music for a bar scene. And so my friend came to me and said, I got this situation here. My director is looking for some rock music for a bar scene in this film that he's working on. What do you got? Give me something. I think I might be able to place this for you. And sure enough, they wound up using a couple songs of mine and giving me a screen credit, a couple $100. But the more important thing I got was an idea. And that was my aha moment, that I realized I just made some money by doing something I had already done. I'd already made this song. It was hanging around. It was doing nothing. And I was able to find a home for it. And then I got to thinking, okay, maybe there's another movie out there that could use a rock song. And that was the light bulb that went off in my head. Because back in those days, after my second band came to a close, I was working menial jobs. And I thought, well, maybe I'm onto something here. And the next phase of my life is my business phase. I started this little company called Master Source. As I mentioned, it started out with just a couple of old demos that I had. And what I found out very, very quickly was that back then, back in the early 90s, there was not a music catalog out there that had music that sounded like commercial pop stuff. There were collections and there were libraries out there back in the early 90s, but most of it was really low-end quality stuff that sounded like it was recorded on a Casio and a cheap drum machine. Probably was recorded on a cheap Casio drum machines and so on. And what I found out very quickly was that when a TV show or film wanted to license a piece of music, say they wanted to license a country song back then, they actually had to go to a real artist to get it. They had to first clear the publishing with the publishing company, which is very expensive and very time-consuming. And then once that was done, they had to clear the version of the song, which is called the master. It's maybe a hard concept to understand that when a song is licensed, there's two components to the license. There's the song itself, and then there's the version of the song. I'll give you an example. You guys know the song All Along the Watchtower? Heard that song? So, who is famous for playing that song? Exactly, Jimi Hendrix. But who wrote the song? Bob Dylan, exactly. So, if someone wanted to license that particular song, that version of All Along the Watchtower, they first would have to go to Bob Dylan's publisher and clear the publishing rights. Because without that, it doesn't matter whose version, if you can't license the song, then it doesn't matter what version you license, you won't even be able to license it. So, you got to clear that, and then if you want a Hendrix version of that, you've got to go to the Hendrix estate, and they're going to charge you $100,000 for it, at least. So my idea was, what if I could produce music that sounded like Jimi Hendrix, or sounded like Garth Brooks, or sounded like Van Halen, or sounded like Madonna, or sounded like whoever else it was that people were licensing back then. What if I produced this music? What about if I had something that sounded like it could be them, but obviously it wasn't them, but it was generically in the same ballpark as these artists. And that was the second rocket ship I was on. This business took off extremely fast. I hit on a gold mine. I started this business in a time where I didn't have any competition. I had very little competition. Nobody else was producing this kind of music with vocals, with pop stuff. And I also started it at a time when music became a lot more popular in TV shows. You guys watch comedies, dramas now, there's wall-to-wall music on some of these shows. But back in the 90s, there really wasn't. Some of the early shows like Party of Five and Melrose Place, those were among the first shows that started using music, kind of as a character and kind of added to the show itself. And with TV, by the way, TV produces on a weekly basis. Such a fast turnaround. It was almost impossible for these guys to license, famous songs back then because of the time constraints and the budget constraints. So I came along. I started producing this music. It sounded like these artists. I was able to license it with one phone call because I own both the song itself and the master. And what we actually wound up doing with all the studios is we just put in place a rate sheet with them. They didn't even have to call me anymore. They just send me reports on what they used, and then I billed them. And it was, as I mentioned, it just blew up on me. In addition to TV shows and films, we had music used in a lot of different things, such as advertising campaigns, radio, TV advertising campaigns, motion picture trailers. You go to the theaters and you see upcoming attractions, and there's music playing in the trailers. Theme parks, video game releases, corporate presentations, later website uses, and oddly enough, even other artists' music videos. And this is the most mind-blowing thing to me. Why would an artist use somebody else's music in their own video? Well, I'm going to give you a prime example of that. We had a song in one of the biggest videos of the 90s, Toby Keith. You guys got to know who Toby Keith is, right? His biggest hit, I think, well, maybe one of his biggest hits is I Love This Bar, right? Matter of fact, he has bars now that he's franchised called I Love This Bar. Well, the next time you see that video, Toby Keith walks into the bar, and there's a piece of music already playing. Hello? That was my music. We also had music licensed. Rage Against the Machine had a very popular video too, Guerrilla Radio, that used a piece of our music. I just found that so amazing that we had music in other people's music videos. But the amount of different opportunities for music placements are almost endless. So, by the way, this is another PowerPoint that I actually put together for a little bit later on when I got acquired by Universal. But we talked a little bit about the idea, how the idea came to me. I started out, and this was a perfect springboard for a musician to get into this, to produce music. It seemed like the perfect job for me to do other than playing. I wish I could have kept up the rock star life for a few more years, but it wasn't meant to be. We talked a little bit about some of the early TV shows that incorporated Melrose Place, 90210, Friends. We had a lot of songs in Friends. By the way, these shows are still airing in syndication, and it's still generating royalties for both me and my co-writers. When a song airs on television, it generates a royalty, and that royalty is split between the publisher and the writer. They each make the same amount of money. I'm still seeing mailbox money from stuff that I placed 20 years ago. It's just unbelievable. We had songs in a lot of Academy Award-winning films. I think in one stretch here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We had songs 8 out of 9 years in a row. We had songs in Academy Award-winning films. These are films that would either have won for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Screenplay. Regardless, a small sample of films that I had placed music in back in the day. We also did custom recordings. You guys familiar with the Osbournes? The Osbournes actually for a while it was the most watched reality show of all time, and I produced the theme, the Crazy Train done big band style. I was the executive producer on that. I just read the Osbournes are coming back for another eight episodes. I don't know if they're going to use the same theme or not. But another component of my business was also custom scoring things for clients. So I custom scored. We're actually going to play some of these here if the audio-visual gods allow us to. These are some other clients that we did themes for. This was William Shatner's short-lived series. By the way, I actually got to do a session with him. He came in, hopefully we'll get this to play a little bit later on. He came in and sang this promo, and it was really a thrill for me to be in the same room as Bill Shatner. He's a funny guy. He nailed it. He was in and out in like 20 minutes, and a total pro. Real nice guy. Monk, pretty big show. Newlyweds. Okay. Next big chapter here. I grew MasterSource from literally a couple of songs to 15 years of building this library up to owning thousands and thousands of songs and generating millions of dollars of revenue. And in 2007, Universal acquired my business. I had a relationship with Universal prior. They were actually the last of the major libraries to acquire a production music business. Sony had acquired a few, Warner Chappell acquired a few, EMI acquired a few. But strangely enough, Universal were the last of the party. But that all changed in 2007 when I agreed to be acquired by Universal. And I stayed on 5 years to run the business for them. How did we get music to clients? Well, it started out with CDs. By the way, I brought a box set of CDs here. We used to produce a collection of CDs every year. It took me almost a whole year to produce this box set of CDs. And I would finish them in time to get them out to the production community in time for the... They had the same schedule as schools, Your favorite shows are on hiatus over the summer and they start up again in the fall. So I would start this project literally in fall and finish by early spring, and then in summer mail these CDs out to all the music editors, the music supervisors, post-production houses, advertising agencies, anybody that had anything to do with the creative musical decision. We also sent out hard drives. Actually, I don't even think Universal does CDs anymore. By the way, I want to give a shout out to one of my colleagues, former colleagues, actually, Dave Garul, who was the marketing director for Killer Tracks, was one of the sister libraries at Universal. So after a while, after you have 200 or 300 CDs, it becomes a little bulky to send this massive collection of CDs to somebody where you can send them a hard drive that has everything on it. And so that became kind of the preferred delivery system as well as online delivery. We developed our own proprietary search engine which allowed the client to find music by a lot of different criteria, by the style of music, by the key, by the instrumentation, by the language. We even had songs sung in different languages. Even searching by lyrics. If you wanted to find a song that had Texas in the lyric, or Paris in the lyric, or whatever in the lyric, our search engine allowed a client to narrow down a lot of different criteria where you could find a country song in the key of A that was up-tempo, that had a female singer and a fiddle in it. So you could narrow down thousands of songs down to the few that really mattered to you. So that was our work, and we spent a lot of time and effort on developing that, and there we go. That was the end of the Universal presentation. So Universal was my home for the next 5 years. As I mentioned, I stayed 5 years to run it for them. And in 2012, so I'm going on 3 years here, I decided to step down as a full-time employee. I think we are ready to get back into the... I decided to step down after 5 years and to pursue some other passions in my life. I worked obviously for the bulk of my adult life. By the way, I didn't even really consider it work. I really enjoyed what I did. I felt I had the perfect job, really. And when I did my job right, everybody came out a winner. In other words, when I placed a songwriter made some money, the client found a piece of music that worked for them, and it was just a win-win situation for everybody. There's actually the press release from Billboard from when I was acquired. I look pretty corporate there, don't I? So that was in Billboard magazine. Oh, so we're going to attempt to play you some of these custom recordings that we did, and hopefully this will work. We tested it, but there's always
The housewife, the mayor, the town, the priest, and everyone around. They were all pawns in my wicked plot to fake shooting a movie when we're really not. A movie crew that really wasn't true. A big old hoax on these new phones. Invasion Iowa. We reached a
So that's probably about 15 seconds, and that was about 2 weeks of work. You know, getting that song, we were given a script, and we had to compose the song essentially to the script. You know, and there was animation involved, and the last piece of the puzzle was getting Bill Shatner in there to do his voiceover. So that was about a 2-week project, you know, of some serious woodshedding, and a lot of revisions. You know, it's very rare when you do something like this that the client signs off on it immediately. There's always, well, we want this to hit here, or we don't quite like the way this is going. Oh, but I just put down 15 horns here, you know. But you know, the client is always right, so you've got to roll with the changes. Let's see if we can get this. Oh, there's Mr. Osborne right there.
Crazy.
So this is the big band version of Crazy Train.
Millions of people live as fools. Maybe it's not too late to learn how to love and forget how to hate.
So you just hired people for the...
Well, yeah, the vocalist that you hear was one of the guys that I had hired to do some of the big band recordings they came to me and said, hey, we have this crazy idea of taking this heavy metal song. I don't know if you guys have heard the original version of Crazy Train with Randy Rhoads. But you know, it's heavy metal. So, you know, can you hit that curveball? And I said, absolutely, I'll get it done for you. And by the way, this was my entry into MTV. MTV became my biggest client. 2 years after this, we had a huge blanket deal with MTV, meaning it's kind of like a buffet, where we worked out a deal, or a fee, a very nice fee, where any of the Viacom shows could use as much master source music as they wanted. And that drove a lot of revenue, let me tell you, because we were used in dozens and dozens of shows, the whole series, you know. I can't tell you how many MTV shows wound up using master source for years and years. And it started with this. It started with me showing them what I could do. And then the last one we have here, I think, is...
Listen to my story of a kid in Hollywood, acting in some movies and doing pretty good. But with his kid from 2,000 miles away, he missed him so much he had to LA.
We're in Hollywood.
This ain't the kind of family you read about in books, not just the glamorous or movie star who looks. Fish out of water, belong to a smell. Only one that matters is how what the hell. Raising the Roots, series premiering Thursday, July 6th at 10:30.
Well, I can't speak for the, whatever, you know. Yeah, that was what they wanted to put on screen. We just put the music to it, you know. So, at the end of chapter 2 of my life, some other pearls of wisdom that I thought I would share with you. And again, these are just personal things that helped me identify with. I use the term the Kentucky Fried Chicken concept. Now, what's that? Okay. I identified a niche with my business. When I first had my aha moment, and I realized that there was this glaring hole in the production music world that nobody had filled yet with, you know, producing pop-type music. I decided to follow that niche and stay unfocused on that niche. I could have, if I wanted to, I could have kind of diversified and maybe gotten into classical music, which I knew nothing about. And classical music is very hard to produce, very expensive to produce. It has a lot more rights issues. I could have done that, but I felt it really, it was not my focus. It was not my wheelhouse. And so the Kentucky Fried Chicken concept is Kentucky Fried Chicken does chicken right. Okay, last time I was in there, I didn't see them selling sushi. You know, I didn't see them selling Mexican food, and they sell chicken. So I decided to kind of take that concept and focus on the thing that I was good at and that I knew about. And when I say being diversification versus dispersification, okay, I don't even know if dispersification is a word, but I think if you try to be too diverse, you get dispersed. And all I can tell you is for me, that when I put my nose to the grindstone, I kept my focus on the type of music that I was familiar with, that I knew I had some knowledge about, that it worked for me. So what is your passion? Okay, this is a personal question that only you can answer. We all have passions. I talked about some of mine. Obviously music is been one of my main passions in life. I got into cars a little bit later. Cars have become a passion. Hey, how about this? 25 years later, from the beginning of Keynote, we got the band back together. 2009, and by the way, I wanted to back up here a little bit, talking about passion. One of the reasons why I stepped down after my 5 years at Universal is I wanted to allow myself the time to pursue other passions, cars being one of them. Another one, I've always been very outdoor orientated. I got into backpacking and hiking, and I followed a passion, a backpacking passion here. I'm going to tell you about here in a little bit. But music being the number one passion in my life, lo and behold, 25 years later, we got the band back together to celebrate our 25-year anniversary. I hadn't played guitar professionally in probably 15, 16 years. And 22 years in between gigs with my old band. Our first show was in January 2009. These days we're good for about 4 to 5 shows a year. We've gotten to go to Europe a couple times. We've played a couple of the big cruises that are out there. We actually did another record. So I'm still following my musical passion when I can. I wish we played a little bit more, but it is what it is with us. We compete against a lot of other bands for the same opportunities. I mean, there's only so many cruises out there and so many rock festivals out there now. So it's a real joy for us now to play again all these years later. As a matter of fact, here we are in 2014. This is actually our 30-year anniversary of the band. And as I mentioned, we played in Europe. We went on a little mini tour there. It was nice to get back to Europe. I told you about one of my other passions, of backpacking and hiking. And I encourage everybody to follow your passion. This picture was taken earlier this year. I decided to scratch a bucket list item off my list. I always wanted to go to Nepal. I always wanted to see the Everest region. And so myself and 2 other buddies finally did it. We finally decided to go to Nepal. We went to Nepal for 3 weeks, and we hiked 100 miles round trip up to Everest Base Camp. Everest Base Camp is at 17,500 feet, guys. It's higher than any mountain here in the continental United States. This picture was taken, I think, the 2nd or 3rd day up at about 12,000 feet. That's a city called Ramche Bazaar, which is the biggest city. I use the word city lightly, but that's about, I think, 500 people live there year-round. There's Mount Everest up there. I'm peeking at it in the middle. We're right outside of base camp there. And that's what base camp looks like. That's the entrance to where the expeditions start to climb the mountain. I don't want to give the impression that I climbed the mountain. I did not climb the mountain. I'm adventurous, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that 10% of the people who attempt that mountain die. So this is where the expeditions start to actually climb the mountain. But that's at 17,500 feet, and that's after 8 days on the trail, 8 days up, 4 days back. But I guess the thing here I wanted to share with you is about following your passion, whatever it is. You know, whether it's a business passion, whether it's a sports passion, or any kind of passion. I really encourage you guys to follow your passions. The passion being cars, we talked about that a little bit. That's my toy. Okay, as we end here tonight, I thought I would leave you with some other pearls of wisdom. And these pearls worked for me. I worked, as I mentioned, I worked hard. Obviously, I wasn't digging ditches. I didn't do a lot of manual work. But I put a lot of hours in as an entrepreneur. By the way, I started this company myself. I never took on a partner. But I did employ up to 3 people at one point in time. I feel good about that. I feel good that I provided a steady income for up to 3 people. And I also provided a leg up for a lot of songwriters who wrote for Master Source. A couple guys told me they made enough money working for me that they actually put down payments on their houses. And so that made me feel good that I was contributing something to society and helping, helping people earn a living. After 15 years or so, I decided to earn out before I burned out. And I hope that each and every one of you are lucky enough to get to a point where you can develop something and you can earn out. And I do encourage you to earn out before you burn out. You don't want to be the richest guy in the graveyard, I can tell you that. And I'm going to leave you with a phrase from a very famous rock movie called Spinal Tap. You guys ever see Spinal Tap? It's about this crazy British band that comes to tour in America way past their prime. Very funny. Matter of fact, most bands have what they call a spinal tap moment. There's so many wacky things that happen in this band, in this movie, that us real guys, relate to. Like, case in point, we had a situation where we were in a motorhome, and we were running late for a gig, right? And this motorhome had an air conditioning unit on top of it, okay? And one of the locals told us about a shortcut that we could take, right? This shortcut that would save us some time. However, the shortcut went through a bridge with an overpass. I think the overpass was maybe 13 feet, and the motorhome was about 13 and a half feet. And we got stuck under the bridge. So that's a Spinal Tap moment. Anyways, the drummer in Spinal Tap had a quote that resonated with me, and I'll leave you with. It's, have a good time all the time. So I leave you with that, and I want to thank you all again for coming tonight and sharing a part of your evening with me. And again, I have to thank Mike Panassis, I have to thank Evan Forster, and I want to thank all of you for coming tonight, being part of this.